Long-haul drivers measure the night in fuel stops, radio checks, and white lines disappearing beneath the hood. They know which stations stay open and which voices belong on the road. These 3 accounts came from drivers who encountered something that kept pace without following any route. The first sighting was at a closed way station west of Rawlins. Case number 10 is open. I drove refrigerated freight between Omaha and Reno for 6 years. My route took me across Interstate 80, and I knew every useful stop between North Platte and Sparks. I knew which islands had showers and where Wyoming crosswinds could turn a trailer. I kept a paper log because batteries fail. The first time I saw the woman was at the closed way station west of Rawlins. It was 1:40 in late October. Freezing rain had started near Sinclair. The station had been dark for years, its scale lane blocked by barrels. A woman stood beside the inspection shed wearing a long red coat. She faced the black hills behind it. I slowed because anyone standing there in that weather needed help. Then I noticed there was no car. No tracks crossed the gravel. The red coat hung perfectly still in wind that was shaking my trailer. I called on Channel 19. A driver named Mags answered 10 miles behind me. She said she would watch for the woman. 20 minutes later, she called again. The station was empty when she passed. I assumed the woman had been picked up. I did not think about her again until the following night. I was outside Evanston, almost 200 miles west, when I passed another closed way station at 2:17. The same woman stood beside the scale house. Same red coat. Same dark hair reaching the collar. Same posture, facing away from the road. This time I did not slow. I checked my mirrors after I passed. The station receded behind me, and she never turned. At the port of entry near Wendover, I mentioned both sightings to the clerk. He looked at my bill of lading and asked whether I had picked up a passenger. I told him no. He pointed toward my passenger window. The glass was fogged on the inside. Someone had drawn a small circle in the fog with one finger. I wiped it away and inspected the cab. The sleeper was empty. Both doors were locked. I told myself the circle was from my own hand, though I had no reason to touch that window. For 3 weeks, I saw nothing. Then dispatch sent me east with medical supplies. Near Laramie, a snow squall closed the road and pushed everyone into the summit rest area. I slept for 4 hours with trucks idling around me. At 3:14, I woke to someone knocking on the passenger door. The woman in the red coat stood inches from the glass, still facing away. Her back was toward me even though that placed her face toward the parking lot. She raised one hand and knocked again without turning around. The trucks parked beside me were gone. Every space in the rest area was empty. I started the engine and reached for the air horn. Before I pulled it, the radio came alive. Mags was calling my unit number. Her voice was broken by static. She asked where I was. I told her Summit. She said that was impossible. She was looking at my truck at the Bitter Creek rest area, nearly 100 miles west. She could see it parked alone near the exit. A woman in a red coat was standing at my passenger door. While she spoke, the woman beside me lowered her hand. The passenger handle moved once. I released the brakes and drove across the empty lot. In my mirror, she stayed beside the parking space, facing away. Then the snow cleared for a second, and every truck I had seen before going to sleep was back around me. Drivers leaned on their horns as I cut across the lane. I stopped at a service plaza near Cheyenne and found muddy water on the passenger floor mat. The circle had returned on the window. Inside it, someone had written 267. That was the mile marker for the Rawlins way station where I first saw her. I reported the incidents to my safety manager. He told me fatigue can create repeated images and pulled me off nights for a month. Before I left his office, he asked whether the coat had brass buttons. I had never mentioned buttons. He said a driver from our company had disappeared at mile 267 in 1994. His truck was found idling on the scale. The passenger door was open. A red coat lay folded on the sleeper, but nobody could identify its owner. When I returned to nights, I changed routes. I took Interstate 70 whenever dispatch allowed, adding hours to avoid southern Wyoming. It did not matter. I saw her at a closed agricultural checkpoint in Utah, then beside an abandoned inspection booth in Nevada. Each sighting was hundreds of miles from the last. Each time she faced away. The final time was outside Fernley. Dawn had begun to gray the mountains. The woman stood at an active scale where 3 inspectors were working. I pulled in and asked if they could see her. All 3 looked toward the red coat. One inspector asked me what woman I meant. She turned then, not toward us, but farther away, until her face should have been visible in the polished side of my trailer. In the reflection, I saw my own passenger seat. Someone was sitting in it wearing a red coat. I quit long-haul work after that trip. I drive local deliveries now and sleep at home. Last winter, the state reopened the old station at mile 267. A former coworker sent me a photograph from the first week. Fresh paint, new lights, 3 trucks on the scale. At the edge of the picture, a woman in red stood facing the hills. On the back of the nearest trailer, someone had drawn a small circle through the road salt. I hauled auto parts from Louisville to a plant outside Tuscaloosa on a dedicated run. I left the warehouse at 8 every evening, crossed into Tennessee before midnight, and reached Alabama around 3. The company liked dedicated routes because nothing changed. Same trailer, same fuel stop, same arrival window. After 2 years, I could identify every bridge by the sound the tires made over its joints. The quietest section was Highway 157 south of Moulton. For about 30 miles, there were no truck stops and almost no houses. Cell service dropped in the low ground. Most drivers used Channel 19 for road reports, but after 2 in the morning, I could go an hour without hearing anyone. One Tuesday in March, a man came over the radio and said, "Nice St. Christopher." I had a small St. Christopher medal hanging from my mirror. My mother gave it to me when I got my commercial license. It was not visible from outside at night. I asked who was calling. The voice answered, "Driver in the blue Mac." My tractor was blue, but so were hundreds of others. I checked both mirrors. The road behind me was empty for at least a mile. Ahead, my headlights showed rain and center lines. The man said my coffee cup was about to fall. I looked down. The stainless cup beside the shifter was creeping toward the edge from the vibration. I caught it before it tipped. I asked for his location. He said, "Closer than the last bridge." There had been no vehicle near me at the bridge. I switched to channel 17. For 10 seconds, there was only static. Then the same voice said I should keep both hands on the wheel. I turned the radio off. The speaker crackled anyway. He described the cab in a flat, careful tone. Blue curtain behind the seats. Shipping envelope on the dash. One glove on the floor. He said there was a photograph tucked above the visor and asked why I kept it hidden. The photograph showed my daughter at her 7th birthday. I pulled over at a lighted church lot and searched the truck. Sleeper, cabinets, side boxes, catwalk. Nobody was there. No tracking device or camera was visible. I called dispatch. The night coordinator, Lee, checked our system and said the nearest company unit was 68 miles north. While I spoke to him, the CB display lit up by itself. The voice said, "Lee cannot help you at marker 43. Lee heard it through my phone. He told me to stay parked while he called county deputies. Then he asked why I was at marker 43. I looked at the roadside sign beside the church entrance. It read 43. A deputy arrived 20 minutes later. He inspected the truck and found nothing. He suggested another driver had a powerful radio and a view through binoculars. I asked how anyone could see the inside of my visor. He did not answer. I resumed the run at 4:10. Lee stayed on the phone until service failed. For 12 miles, the radio remained dark. Then Channel 19 opened with the sound of my engine. It was not similar. It was exactly my engine, including a faint whistle from the turbo hose that maintenance had scheduled for Friday. Beneath it, I heard myself breathing. The voice said, "Left hand at 10, right hand at 4. That was where my hands were. He said, "Eyes on the mirror." I refused to look. The passenger mirror sat at the edge of my vision, bright with reflected rain. The voice began counting down from 10. At 6, something struck the rear of the cab, not the trailer. The wall directly behind my seat flexed inward with a dull metal pop. At 4, the blue sleeper curtain moved. At 2, A wet hand appeared around its edge. I slammed the brakes. The trailer swung slightly and settled. I ran from the cab without checking traffic and stood in the rain beside the road. The curtain inside hung still. The radio continued counting. It reached 0, paused, then said my full name. The truck rolled forward 6 inches, although the brakes were set. I waited outside until another driver stopped. His name was Curtis. He let me sit in his cab while we called police again. From his radio, channel 19 was silent. From my truck, parked 50 yards ahead, we could hear a voice speaking through the closed windows. Curtis asked what it was saying. We walked close enough to understand. It was describing his cab now. Red thermos, cracked tablet mount, photograph of 2 boys clipped above the visor. Curtis went pale. He drove away before the police arrived. The officers found no damage behind my seat. The metal panel was smooth. My radio passed inspection at the terminal. Maintenance replaced it anyway. The new unit stayed boxed on the passenger floor for my return trip. Near Moulton, the boxed radio spoke. It said the medal was missing. I looked at the mirror. The St. Christopher medal was gone. I found it later in the sealed trailer, lying on top of a pallet loaded in Louisville. The shipping seal had not been broken. I left the company that week. I still drive, but I keep no CB in the cab. Last month, I bought a used tractor from a dealer in Decatur. During the test drive, the dashboard speakers cut out while I crossed a bridge. A man said, "Nice new cab." Then he described the shirt I had laid out on my bed at home that morning, including the missing button at the cuff. The load came out of a bonded warehouse in Joliet on a Thursday night. My dispatcher called it machine components, 41,000 pounds, sealed for a plant in Chattanooga. The paperwork listed 12 steel crates. A warehouse supervisor named Pritchard met me at door 32 and watched while I backed under the trailer. He handed me the seal number and told me twice not to open the doors before delivery. That was not unusual for bonded freight. What was unusual was the trailer. It sat low on the left rear, as if the weight had been loaded badly. I asked Pritchard to recheck it. He looked beneath the trailer but would not open the doors. He said the scale ticket was clean and tapped the seal with one finger. I pulled onto the warehouse scale. Gross weight was 78,400 pounds. Legal but close. The left side still looked heavy. Pritchard signed the ticket and told me to keep moving if I heard anything settle. He used the word settle. I remember that because he did not say shift. At the first red light, something inside moved from the rear of the trailer to the front. The sound was not a crate sliding. It was a sequence of heavy impacts, one after another, ending directly behind the cab. The tractor rocked forward when it stopped. I pulled into a truck stop in Wilmington and checked the seal. It was intact. The tires looked good. I called dispatch and asked for permission to inspect. My dispatcher, Carla, put me on hold. When she returned, she said the customer had refused. I was to continue and report any handling problem at delivery. The truck stop had a public scale. I weighed again, 76,900 pounds. I had burned less than 10 gallons of fuel. The truck should not have lost 1,500 pounds. Carla blamed the scales. She told me to use the certified one south of Kankakee. On the way there, I heard the load move whenever I stopped. At speed, it stayed quiet. At a light, the impacts traveled toward the cab. When traffic moved, they traveled slowly toward the doors. The certified scale showed 79,100. The attendant ran it twice. Same result. 700 pounds heavier than at Joliet, with less fuel in the tanks. I parked under the floodlights and inspected the seal again. The metal strip bore the correct number. From inside the trailer came a soft scraping sound at shoulder height. It moved along the wall until it reached where I stood. Then it stopped. I placed my palm against the aluminum. Something pressed from the other side. The panel bowed outward beneath my hand. I stepped back. The pressure followed, sliding along the wall to remain opposite me. I called state police. A trooper arrived, reviewed my paperwork, and said he could cut the seal if I believed someone was inside. Carla called while we were speaking. She said opening the trailer would violate the bond and cost me my job. The trooper asked her what the cargo was. She repeated machine components but could not name the company receiving them. While they argued, the trailer suspension rose several inches. The rear had become lighter. We both saw it. Then 3 impacts moved from the doors toward the nose, and the suspension sank again. The trooper reached for his cutters. Before he touched the seal, someone knocked from inside. For slow knocks. A pause. Then 2. The trooper asked if I knew that pattern. I did. It was my driver number, 42. He cut the seal. Cold air came out when we opened the right door, though the trailer was not refrigerated. 12 steel crates were chained to the floor in 2 straight rows. The chains were tight. Nothing could have shifted. Frost covered the walls and ceiling. At the front, beyond the crates, the frost had been rubbed away in the outline of a standing person. The outline faced the nose of the trailer. One arm reached upward. Written above it with a finger were the words, "Keep moving." The trooper photographed everything and closed the doors. He escorted me to a state inspection yard. Their scale read 81,000 pounds. The truck had gained almost 2 tons in 30 miles. A federal contact arrived before dawn and took custody of the trailer. Nobody told me what was in the crates. My company fired me for breaking the seal, then reversed the decision 2 days later and paid me for the full run. Carla stopped answering my calls. Her extension was removed from the directory. 6 months later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was my original Joliet scale ticket and a second ticket from Chattanooga. According to it, the trailer arrived at the plant at 6:20 that morning, while I was still at the inspection yard in Illinois. The Chattanooga weight was 68,000 pounds. The receiving signature was mine. There was also a photograph of the open trailer. The 12 crates were gone. In their place stood a single steel chair bolted to the floor, facing the doors. A man sat in it with his back to the camera. He wore my company jacket. I turned the photograph over. Someone had written my driver number, then 4 words. "You stopped too soon." I have changed companies twice since then. Whenever I brake with an empty trailer, I still hear weight move toward the cab. The scales always say I am legal. I no longer ask them to run the number twice. The road records showed ordinary mileage, legal hours, and deliveries completed on time. None accounted for the figures beside closed scales, the voice inside an empty frequency, or cargo whose weight depended on whether the truck was moving. Cases 10, 11, and 12 remain open.